Hello everyone and welcome back to the XNA 101 class. So here we are at the final game. It's time to start looking at SpaceFighter. Now at one point throughout this class we had said that we were going to introduce 3D with SpaceFighter, and then as the class ended up taking longer and longer to complete, we said not too terribly long ago in the forums that we were just going to go back to the original plan, and then we were going to extend the class for anyone that wanted to hang out and kind of see what kind of things we wanted to come up with, because we love playing and we love coming up with different projects. Man, we've got all sorts of them that we are very excited about sharing. Some really good stuff is being developed over here at 3D Buzz right now. And but we need to get everything out of the way that we told you we were going to do to begin with. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull back on SpaceFighter and focus on it with the way that we had intended to at the very beginning. Now, of course, as we have switched gears several games back, we're not going to come in here and walk line by line by line by line through the entire game. And then, of course, everybody comes in and copies line by line. And then everybody produces the exact same game. And that's not what we're looking for. We're looking to see people be creative, to use the skills that they have learned in this class, and to design their own versions of games like SpaceFighter. Yeah.
Because aside from some of the specific subsystems in our version of SpaceFighter, you really have enough at your disposal to make a SpaceFighter-like game. You could even say that Canon was a SpaceFighter-like game.
Yep, for sure. Now, this doesn't mean that we're just going to throw out an implementation plan and say, good luck, and we can't wait to see what you guys do. Though I must admit, I was surprised we didn't see too many games submitted over inside the XNA class after we went through Battle Blocks, Memory Master, and Laser Bikes. Though there were a couple of students, and there were a couple of really nice submissions as well. But, all in all, not many students submitted. Hopefully we'll see a few more submissions with SpaceFighter. I know Cronus turned one in that was absolutely amazing all the way back on, I think it was day number 2 of the class. Perhaps he can come up with something even more amazing now. Though I know Cronus is pretty busy, so you never know. But anyways, we do have a few things that we would like to cover so that your bases are completely covered in regards to creating this kind of a 2D top-down shooter. So, SpaceFighter, let's write it again. What kind of things will we be talking about as we work our way through these videos? First of all, if I can just avoid for 2 seconds hitting that button. Zach's been on this computer and he's reprogrammed it again. All right, so we're going to start out and we're going to be taking a look at animated sprites.
Because up until now, all of the graphics drawn have been simple texture assets where we draw the entire thing. I think aside from a very small look at the syntax for a sprite batch itself, where we made the little number counter example.
Right.
Other than that, there's been very few looks at source rectangles inside of sprite batch drawing.
Exactly. So now they already have everything they need in order to do this. I mean, we have done, source stuff in the past, and we have done timing systems in the past. So for those of you that have a really good handle on this kind of stuff, you can kind of consider these as some bonus videos and put them in the back,
Or even better, watch the initial parts, watch the whiteboard sessions for these videos, and see what you can come up with.
But we will be coding out full examples so that you guys will have a good understanding of how it works, just in case you don't have that understanding at the moment. Now, from animated sprites, things are going to start getting a bit more interesting. We're going to take a look at texture data.
And the reason we need to get into texture data, what we're talking about are the individual pixels that make up a texture, more specifically a texture 2D instance. Since thus far our texture data has been loaded into the texture 2D data type, we're going to be taking a closer look at that type to show how you can read the individual pixel data out of a texture 2D, and also how you can save modified pixel data back into a texture 2D.
Ooh, so now we're getting into some fun stuff. And of course, with an understanding of this, we can then take a look at creating procedural textures.
The example here is going to be the star field effect as a background for SpaceFighter. But what we wanted to do here is, instead of loading in a texture that was a picture of stars, we wanted to take a look at generating our own star field.
Right.
Now, it's going to be generally a very simple star field. It's going to be based on very few sheets of stars as finished texture 2Ds, but we're going to generate those textures on the fly, needing no file asset to create them.
Exactly. And it looks really nice in the end. After that, It's time to move up to some even better stuff. We're going to take a look at per pixel collision detection.
And really, this is going to draw on many of the topics covered up until this point. It is going to tie immediately back to our texture data sessions. It's going to need to look at the individual pixels of a texture in order to tell if they are colliding. But it's going to need to, you could say, remap the coordinates of the two textures so that the pixels can be compared, because different textures will have entirely different dimensions, the objects on the screen will have different positions, and we have to get everything locked down so we can do an accurate and correct check of the individual pixel data.
Exactly. And then from here, at this point, they've got everything they need to put together SpaceFighter, their version of SpaceFighter. But we're going to go one step further. We're going to get into delegates and events. This is going to allow you to really. So what I'm looking for.
It gives you more freedom when working with it.
It really does. Well, let me write this out, and it'll make a lot more sense.
We want to introduce this so that you do have more freedom when setting up the, I guess you could say, interaction between the items that are going to be within your game. As we set up delegates and events, they allow us to keep the functionality of any individual item more generic. We don't have to have items that are interdependent. They don't have to know about each other to perform specific events. They can tie at a more loose level. They can know that they have a certain function, and then that function can later be bound to other functionality at runtime.
Exactly. So we're going to be creating timers. We'll walk you through how to do that. And then we'll have events that we're going to create to demonstrate things like on death.
Again, that way you keep the idea of a death function being very simplistic. Something can die, but we don't immediately specify what happens. We don't say if projectiles are spawned, or if an explosion graphic is spawned, or if debris is spawned. That's left generic. We can instead later tie that event to a specific action.
On animation looping.
And that way the generic animation class can, of course, have any number of tile sheets loaded in for different animations. But it can be very useful to drive game events based on an animation. That way an animation can drive the timing of your game.
Exactly. So armed with all of this, an understanding of how to do animated sprites, how to work with texture data, how to go about creating your own procedural textures, how to handle per pixel collision detection, and then, of course, the ability to set up and work with delegates and events. Now, wow, you guys are going to be armed with quite an arsenal of techniques, if you will, for putting together your own version of SpaceFighter. And, if you take a look at everything here and then everything you've learned all the way up to this point, it's a lot of stuff. And for a 101 introduction class, I would say it's been a pretty extreme class with about 100 hours worth of content. That's goes beyond your typical 101 classes. But anyways, this is what we're going to be doing. Now, one final note, I'm going to be passing the torch over to Logan, and Logan's going to become more of the instructor as he was supposed to have been from the very beginning. If you guys recall, Logan was going to be the instructor, and I was going to play the role of student. And as always, I failed miserably.
Then you discovered the whiteboard, and everything else.
It was so much
history.
fun. That's right. So I'm going to try to pass the whiteboard over to Logan, and I will throw stuff in if I think it needs to be thrown in, or if I need to help clear something up. And I'll ask questions as well. Just try to play the role of student. And with that, that's pretty much what's going to be going on. So I guess we can go ahead and get started by taking a look at animated sprites.